I support this bill.
I call the Honourable Mary Ann Street.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise to speak to the third reading of this Conservation Natural Heritage Protection Bill. And I want to congratulate Jackie Dean, the member in whose name this bill stands, for getting it through to this stage and very shortly onto the statute books. It is a worthwhile bill. It is something that came out of the members' own concern for those wildlife, natural and historic resources that abound in her own electorate of Waitaki. And in the course of defending things that she sees and lives with on a regular basis in the Waitaki electorate, she has chosen to do something that benefits the whole of New Zealand, and for that I commend her. Her original intention was that those resources would be better protected, and I think this bill will achieve that in law. There are two components to it, Mr Speaker. One is that it will give us consistency across all of those pieces of legislation that are administered by the Department of Conservation. When it was introduced, as the previous speaker has just iterated, when it was first introduced, it amended a number of acts, as I say, that are under the remit of the Department of Conservation. First, the Conservation Act of 1987, the National Parks Act 1980, the Reserves Act 1977, the Wildlife Act 1953, we're going back further and further in time, and the Wild Animal Control Act of 1977. So all of those pieces of legislation had various penalties for the abuse or the misuse or the harm or destruction or some other kind of ill being done to our natural and historic and wildlife resources. In the course of the discussion at the Select Committee about this bill, Ms Deans was generous enough to entertain the possibility of an amendment, and she has subsequently been repeatedly generous in acknowledging the amendment that I proposed, which resulted in a new Part 6, the amendments to the Marine Mammals Protection Act 1978. Because the intention of the bill, which we all supported, that was to provide consistency across these acts and to provide increased penalties that would make these acts more effective, could be complemented by the addition of the Marine Mammals Protection Act. The marine mammals were the ones that were left out. Everything else was included, and with some judicious drawing of members' attention to these issues, the Marine Mammals Protection Act became included for amendment. So in other words, it was entirely possible to, under Jackie Dean's original bill, to protect and defend native orchids or geckos or other flora and fauna of this country from harm or destruction or smuggling, as has become more commonly experienced in recent times. But in addition to that, while those things were able to happen under the member's original bill, it was not covering marine mammals. So whales, seals, sea lions, those mammals that require special protection in our environment. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister's willingness to accept my amendment does him credit, and the member's willingness to accept my amendment to include marine mammals is important. And of course, just recently we've seen 2 cases brought before the courts where people have been charged with and convicted of harm being done to marine mammals. So the bashing of seal pups, whether in the name of hunting, which is highly, well, was never going to stand as a defence anyway, everybody could see that. But those kinds of crimes which attracted lesser penalties under some acts than others, and therefore charges which were brought under the Wildlife Act were going to result in different penalties from those under the Marine Mammals Protection Act, will now, that will never be able to happen again, because the punishments will be the same. They will be standardised, and they are substantial. They have moved from simply $500 or 1 month imprisonment to $100,000 or $200,000 for individuals, and daily penalties on top of that that are very substantial. In addition to that, hefty prison sentences. So, Mr. Speaker, there has been a seriousness about this bill which has been laudable. The Select Committee has applied itself to this bill with care. There has been no dissension between us on this issue. I would be very keen to see if there was, when this bill is passed, whether in fact there was any evidence to show that seismic testing did harm to marine mammals, and whether or not there is a risk here for the Minister, who was so generous in including the amendment, that suddenly he might be hoist by his own petard. But at this stage in proceedings, I am keen that this bill be passed by this House, because all parties agree that protection is required, that consistency is needed across all of these pieces of legislation that the Department of Conservation administers, more thinly and with greater difficulty now than when they used to have a more adequate budget and greater staffing. However, they still apply all their efforts to ensuring that the legislation that is within their remit is complied with properly and completely. But, Mr. Speaker, I think probably, as well as the consistency, thank you, Mr. Speaker, as well as the consistency across other laws, which is desirable, it is the extent of the punishments that is going to be one of the interesting factors to pursue, just to see whether in fact it does act as the deterrent that we seek. So whether it's $100,000 or $200,000 for an individual with an increased, an ongoing daily penalty of up to $10,000 or $20,000, or whether it is the prospect of a maximum term of 2 years imprisonment for individuals and 5 years in other circumstances where commercial gain is the factor. It's going to be interesting to see how effective these penalties are in deterring the kind of behaviour that we have seen to date. So now people who bash seal pups will be subjected to the same penalties as people who smuggle geckos, and that's as it should be. I want to finally commend the member whose name this bill is in again for bringing this bill to Parliament's attention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Eugenie Sains.